Hey guys, my name is Allie, and something that you guys don't know about me is that I hate compliments. They're actually something that make me squirm around, and if there's a ditch, I will crawl in it. Sometimes people might say things like, "Oh my gosh, Allie, you have awesome style." And while some of you might be like, "Yeah, that's so great, I do have good style," I hate that so much. I will say things like, "Oh, I got that shirt for 50 cents," or "I got it in Oklahoma from the side of the road," anything to make it not seem like it's on me. But sometimes I think that I use that as a way of just breezing over what that person said. I don't want to face it because I don't want to be seen. And that's really what is happening for me, is those compliments mean that someone is looking at me, someone is noticing what I'm doing. And I don't want to be seen as a success or a failure. I'd rather just not be seen at all. And I think a lot of us do this too. We use humor as a defense mechanism. And I'm sure some of you are in the room like, "No, that's not me, but that is my friend." And I know there are some of you that is like, "That is me to a T." But the awesome thing about the Bible is that there are people that are just like us. So today we're going to take a look at Sarah's story. Now we can find her story in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. So God promised Sarah that she would be the mother of many, many generations to come. And that sounds great, but her life wasn't so glamorous. It was full of so many trials and so many failures. You see, Sarah lived in a time when all women really had was to be a mother. So Sarah finds out that she is promised by God that she's going to be the mother of many, many generations to come. But the thing is, she was unable to have kids. And I know for me, that would be incredibly difficult to sit with. That the thing that God promises you, you're unable to fulfill. But the thing that I want you guys to hear today is that God responds to faith even in the midst of failure. So after Sarah found out that she wasn't able to have kids, things didn't get any easier for her. So where her husband and her were living, there was a famine. And at the time they were really, really old. And that famine meant that there was no food for them to have. So they needed to travel and find a new place to live. And I can't even imagine after they found out they couldn't have kids and then a famine struck, just what they were even thinking. I know if I was Sarah, I would be so upset. So flash forward 11 years later. They're still wandering, trying to find a place to live, and they're still trying to have a kid. Now Sarah does something that I think we're all tempted to do. She takes matters into her own hands. She's tired of waiting, she's tired of wandering, so she ends up doing something that isn't God's best. And you see, that wasn't what God wanted anyway. But God can still use us even when we doubt ourselves. So the thing is that God doesn't want us to doubt ourselves. He actually always wants the best for us. But I think that's hard sometimes for all of us to understand. So I'd love for you guys to get out your Bibles or go on your phone, and we're gonna go to Genesis chapter 18, verses 10 to 12. And we're just gonna catch up on Sarah's story. So at this time, her and her husband Abraham, they're still wandering. They're out in the desert, they're in a little tent. I'm sure it's not nice like a lot of the tents that you guys might have, or if you've ever gone glamping, it's not that for sure. So these three guys come up to Sarah and Abraham Abraham is a super lovely guy, and he tells Sarah to go get these men some food, and this is what ends up happening. Then one of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah has long passed the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, "How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is so old?" So I don't know if you guys caught that, but Sarah laughed. She laughed at what those men told her that God was going to do in her life. So imagine your grandma and your grandpa have an angel, and it comes and visits them, and it says that they're gonna have a kid. Sarah was unsure of it, and that's why she laughed. I think sometimes it's so easy to receive something and be like, no way, that's not gonna happen, and not especially for me. And that's exactly what Sarah did. So the writer of Proverbs points out that laughter can conceal a heavy heart, but when the laughter ends, the grief remains. And I think that's a pretty heavy statement that perfectly sums up Sarah's story. You see, she didn't know what to do in that moment in the tent, so she just ends up laughing. She uses humor as a defense mechanism because she doesn't know what to do. She's faced with this already impossible situation turned now possible. So she just laughs it off. And I think the thing that Sarah forgot in that moment in the tent was that God can do the impossible. So Sarah and her husband Abraham end up going on to have a son named Isaac. And Isaac ends up being the father to many, many generations, just as Sarah was promised to be the mother of so many generations. God is greater than all of those impossible situations that you might be facing. God is greater than you not making the sports team. He's greater than you getting a bad grade, not being a good friend, and he's even greater than your parents going through a divorce. So I challenge you guys to ask yourselves this week. Are you like Sarah, tempted to laugh when faced with the impossible situation? Or do you just get angry and walk away? Or maybe you get super sad and just cry. But how are you going to let God respond even in the midst of your failures? So take this opportunity and just talk to someone about that. Talk about how God is going to respond even in the midst of your failures.